What's going on? Alright, I got the bike all ready for some nice weather we got coming up. All the stuff I want to do this year pretty much is done. And I'll do a real quick overview of what we got here. It's a 2011 CBR1000RR Honda. And it's been modified quite a bit in terms of everything but the engine pretty much. I haven't done any engine work at all. It does have an ECU flash and the S-bend FMF slip-on with a stock header. And the ECU flash was designed specifically for that. The S-bend is supposed to preserve some of the stock torque that the bike has, instead of whereas if you had a straight through system, you would probably get more top end power. And for the street, that's cool by me. I spend most of my time whacking the throttle at 6,000 RPMs or whatever. So when I want that power suddenly, I'd rather have it that way than have the top end power. Not to say this bike doesn't have top end power, it sure does. Usually the top end power is actually so scary at 55 degrees or 45 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm a little spooked sometimes to whack this thing wide open at 10,000 plus RPM. So for the most part, I'd rather have that power down low. So that's a good compromise, I'd say. Not to mention the fact I got that pipe real cheap from somebody on 1000rr.net for like $100. So can't beat that deal. And it saved 8 pounds for removal of the catalytic converter. So another big mod we got is the carbon fiber rims from BST. And I got the front one on eBay for $900. I got the rear one from Brock's for $1,700 on a Black Friday deal. And that saved 4.5 pounds in the back, 2.5 in the front. So that was a real nice mod for this bike. It was a lot of money. That's almost enough money to pretty much buy another 600 or something like that. But I'd rather have, this bike is kind of an experiment, and I'll explain a little bit more about what that experiment is. And it's basically to do with weight. The idea being that a lot of mods that people will do to bikes will actually add weight. And if you actually go and run the numbers, a lot of times you won't even be able to find out how much weight something does or doesn't add or take away. Like, people would say a slip-on might save you 20 pounds. Well, it depends on the bike. In this case, it was 8 pounds. That's definitely not bad. And a lot of times, same thing with the rims. Some bikes, these carbon fiber rims save a huge amount of weight. But for bikes that already have light wheels, you got to wonder, how much really does it save? And in this case, it was 7 pounds. So 7 pounds is good by me. I mean, it's something that I would recommend doing pretty much last. A lot of the other mods you can do to your bike, if you're trying to go the weight reduction route, would be more important to do first. It's a good value, actually. Carbon fiber rims are a good value, whereas it's about $1 per gram saved. But most carbon fiber pieces you'll see on most bikes actually add weight. They use it for covering the frames and covering the engine and replacing the fairings. That's probably a marginal savings of weight. If really not a good value at all. It's more of a cosmetic issue. The rims have both. They're a cosmetic upgrade and a performance upgrade, and actually a good value relative to most any other performance upgrade you could do. It just happens to be a really big price tag. It's a lot of performance upgrading all at once. That's why I did the front wheel separately. Another thing I did here is I've been experimenting with, as you can see here, I've only got one brake, and I've got a 120/60/17 front tire from Dunlop Q3 Plus. They just made that size this year in that Q3 Plus, and it's 8.2 pounds. So it's almost 2 pounds lighter than most front tires. 1.5 pounds to 2 pounds. And the fact that I only have one brake is something that, again, it's probably not recommended. I wouldn't run around recommending that to people, certainly if you're going to a racetrack. And the reason is because, not necessarily because of stopping power, but because of heat. If you're on the racetrack with one brake, you're going to heat it up a lot faster, and you're going to experience brake fade, unless you have some pretty fancy gear going on there. I kept my stock rotor. The stock rotors are some of the lightest you can get because they're 4.5 millimeters. Most aftermarket ones are 5 millimeter. I have a stock Brembo stock Tokaico caliper with Carbon Lorraine XB 5K brake pads in there, and it works great. Believe me, this thing stops real fast. This bike is only 377 pounds with 1 gallon of fuel in it, so you can rest assured that when it comes time to stop, it stops. And you could flip the bike right over with this brake if you wanted to. So it's not necessarily a matter of stopping power, it's a matter of heat. On the street, The way I ride, heat is not an issue because it's a matter of riding the pace, which means you hit a couple turns and then you shut it down and take your time, get mosey on to the next couple corners, and then you hammer those corners. So the tires don't get a chance to build a lot of heat. There's not a lot of top end speed. There's not a lot of extreme braking from high speeds and that sort of thing. So the tires don't build heat, the brakes don't build heat. And in some ways that's actually a problem. You know, depending on what kind of tires and brakes you had, that would be a problem. These tires and brakes were selected specifically for the fact that I don't build heat and that I don't really ride in hot weather. Matter of fact, it's freaking freezing here most of the time. So I went out today, it was 48 degrees when I left. Right now it's about 40 degrees. And these Dunlop Q3 Plus, they actually stick really well in the cold weather. So I got a weird size tire here. It's a 120/60. Usually it'd have a 120/70. So the consequences of that, this is a flatter tire. It doesn't have as much of a peak, and it's a little. And once you get to the edge, it suddenly gets steep. Whereas the 120/70, I would say, actually has more of a even curve. Took me about 3 turns to get used to the difference in profile. After that, I don't notice it. What I do notice is the fact that it's 2 pounds lighter. So the type of riding I do, I'm not going to be out here on these edges most of the time. Matter of fact, with the 120/70, I would not be surprised if you actually have more potential for lean angle, because I actually get smaller chicken strips on this tire than I did on the 120/70. On the 120/70, I probably had strips about that big, and on this tire, well, I can't tell you because it's been freaking freezing. So I can't really, I'm too scared to go riding on the edge of my tires at 45 degrees. But the truth be told, these tires can probably do that just fine, because you can thrash the rear tire when it's 45 degrees pretty hard without breaking it loose. And so therefore, if you're carving through a turn and you're being smooth with the throttle, I have no doubt in my mind you'd probably be just fine out on these edges. But the point is, I'm going to wait till some warmer weather before I explore some of the deeper lean angles. And so this tire is kind of experimental, and so far it's been a success. The rear tire is also experimental. It's a 180/55/17 with a Q3 Plus. So it's 13.13 pounds when I first got it. And it's worth mentioning that, let's say for example you had a 190/55/17 from Bridgestone S21. I'm pretty sure that's a 15.5 pound tire. So you're talking a difference of 2.4 pounds just by your choice of tire. There's going to be consequences to that. The 190/55 will give you it'll just give you more tire out here. You can get more, you can go deeper into really deep lean angles, deeper than this tire can. At least being that this is a 180/55 on a 6-inch rim, it's been spread just a little bit. So it's not quite as, I probably can't get quite as much of a lean angle out of it. I know for a fact that I won't lean as far as I do on a 190/55. The 190/55 is taller, so it's going to shift your weight forward just a little bit. And so I did actually try the 190/55 on this bike with the Q3 Plus, but that I think was only 14.6 pounds or something like that, so it's not quite as bad as the Bridgestone S21. The tire was fine. I had no complaints. It was great, but the truth of the matter is I had a little bit of a chicken strip here, even after really taking it out and thrashing it. So I realized I don't actually need all that extra lean angle on the street. I just can't use it, not even in the parking lots. So I decided to try a lighter tire, and it worked great. So overall, that experiment has been a success. I mean, you're going to have a little bit less contact patch with a 180 than you would with a 190. So I went out and tested to see how much traction I had, and I just kind of was being jerky with the throttle and blasting it at high RPMs, and I just honestly can't get it to break loose. So for my type of riding, it's just, this thing has more than enough traction for what I need, and even at cool temperatures, which I love. It's a relatively cheap tire as well. So I would say that's another successful experiment. I'm going to stick with this size. I'm going to keep running these smaller tires. You know, a lot of these higher numbers on your tires are also designed for higher loads. I don't ride 2-up on this bike, and I don't ride at high speeds, so I'm definitely thinking I could sacrifice some of that to get these lighter tires. And the lighter tires will allow you to accelerate harder, brake harder, change direction quicker, and reduces steering effort. It reduces everything. It reduces tire wear, it reduces your fuel consumption, it reduces brake pad consumption, you name it. So it's kind of neat as an experiment. This bike has about 15.5 pounds of weight that's been removed from the from the rotational parts of the bike. Total adds up to about 15.5 at this point, and I don't think I can go much further with that. Another thing worth mentioning with this tire is that even though it's a 180/55, it's actually 187 millimeters wide. So it's only, you know, I think the 190/55 is like 193 millimeters. So it's only 6 millimeters less in width. So I really have no concerns about putting this on a 6-inch rim. It works pretty good. Maybe it doesn't look quite as badass. You know, if you have a 190/55, has that giant slug in the back, it looks kind of cool. But I'm not prioritizing looks on this bike. It was a fixer-upper when I got it, and I cleaned it up pretty nice, but I really don't care that much about what it looks like in terms of, I'm more interested in the performance. So now you've got a EK 3D GP chain. It's the lightest chain I could find. It was a little more expensive. It was a lot more expensive than the next best chain, which is the DID ERV3. So that's the one I recommend for most people. If you want to go that extra mile, you can get the EK 3D GP. It comes in black. I think the DID only comes in gold, and that was another reason. I guess that's one example where I did care about the looks. This is a Renthal ultralight sprocket. It's designed for the Marchesini, BST, and Oz hubs. So I had to find that special. It was 44 teeth, and the front is a 15 tooth ultralight Renthal, which is a little bit lighter. I think it's like 0.3 pounds lighter, and I'm pretty sure this sprocket was like, I want to say it was about a pound lighter. I have it on my spreadsheet, but I think it's about a pound lighter than the stock one. If you get the stock one's a 42 tooth steel, and this is a 44 teeth aluminum. So that was a nice little weight savings there. And there's a lot of other things I've done to the bike, just little bits and pieces here and there that I've taken off, basically just taken it straight off. You can see there's no chain cover, there's no rear hugger. This is a 2012 shock, and on a 2011 1000RR. I swapped them out because this one's balance free. It's supposed to be a better shock. I do agree with that. Just from the little bit I can say I definitely noticed the difference when I switched those shocks. It was cheap. It was only 65 bucks on eBay. It was really easy to switch the shock. If you put a jack like right here and jack up the tail, then you can just slide the bolts right out of the dog bones down there, and you can slide that. I was able to slide that shock right out of there and slide the new one right in. So it was probably like a 20-minute job, and it did actually add weight though. That actually added a pound to the bike. So that's unfortunate, but what can you do? There's another place where I added some weight. These are LEDs, COB LEDs with 3 sides. They're about 33 watts. So you got about 30 watts of LED dissipation in that bulb. So that's about 3.5 watts per LED. And man, these things are unbelievably bright. Probably too bright for the low beam. I think I'm going to switch back to the 2-sided for the low beam and keep the 3-sided in the high beam. And also, this is actually, believe it or not, this is a $30 headlight. That was, from China, just an eBay thing. This bike came with a smoked one, but it was all mangled up inside, like some kind of liquid had gotten in there. So I swapped it out with a clear one because I'd rather have, I think it actually looks better this way, to be honest, and I'd rather have the extra lumens at night, for safety and whatnot. I'd rather be able to see. That's a big deal. In other words, I'd like to be able to still ride at night and not just have to come home because it gets dark. And there's no front fender on here. That's pretty unusual. It leaves your radiator open to getting hit by stones and whatnot, but truth of the matter is I've been riding this way for a long time. Never had a problem. Same thing with having the one brake. Same thing with the 120/60. My bike came with a 120/60 when I first got it. It was a Q3. I thought it was horrible, but when I took it off and weighed it, I found out it was 7.5 pounds. I was like, oh man, that got me thinking. That might also be worth mentioning here, is that when I got this bike, it had a 180 or it was a 190/50/17 Q3 on the back, and it was 10 point something pounds when I took it off. That really got me thinking. That tire lost like 3 pounds of weight from being brand new to being used. So I'm thinking, if you were going to go to the drag races, for example, and you had a brand new set of tires, it's going to weigh quite a lot more than a set of tires that's been worn down a little bit. And so I started tracking the weight of the tire, front and rear, as I put miles on it. And I've been tracking that in my spreadsheet, try to get some idea how that works. And it seems to me that you can almost predict your how much tire life you have left based on its weight, assuming that you're wearing the tire pretty evenly and not wearing a flat spot in the center or something like that. So that's something that I never heard anybody really talk about, was the weight of tires from being new to being used. And the fact that I took off a 7.5 pound front tire and a 10 pound rear tire and put brand new ones on, that added quite a bit of weight, and it was noticeable the minute I pulled out of the driveway. So I got thinking to myself, that might actually make a difference in the drag races. But I'm not saying I would go and put like whoop tires on there, but it's just something to be mindful of.